It has been 1 year since the release of the Xbox Series X and S along with the PlayStation 5, and I want to talk about what has changed over the past year, what exactly has been going on with these systems, and really just my own personal experience with them. To begin with, let's just take a look at how things have been going sales-wise. Now, it's not really any huge secret that when it came to the last generation of PS4 versus Xbox One, PlayStation outsold by a very large margin, and for a while was running ahead by a whole 2-to-1. And as of right now, at least with the estimates that have been made about the current systems, the PS5 has sold just over 13.4 million units, while the Xbox is estimated for both the Series X and S combined to have sold just over 8 million. So not quite the same disparity, but there is clearly a leader here in terms of raw sales. A lot of that has to do with the momentum coming out of last generation, the sort of brand loyalty to each system, what actual content has been released for each one, and this is really one of the big areas that's been a problem for Xbox that they had last generation that, at least for this first year, has still been going on. Exclusive games. If you just take a look at the list of exclusives that have come out for each system, we're not necessarily paying attention to what is next-gen exclusive, but just what PlayStation has and what Xbox has, the list is pretty heavy in the PS5's favor right now. I mean, just looking at the launch alone, right? They had Spider-Man Miles Morales out, Sackboy: A Big Adventure, even Astro's Playroom I would count for this because it was such an excellent free demo you could play, and the Demon's Souls remake. And then over time, we got more games released with stuff like Returnal, Ratchet & Clank, Kena, and most recently Deathloop, which, funny enough, is actually made by an Xbox game studio now. Meanwhile, on Xbox, there's basically been two games. They had the Medium for a little bit, which was a timed exclusive, and has now made its way to the PlayStation, and then had Microsoft Flight Simulator, Forza Horizon 5, which has been a very large success this past week, and that's it. In their defense, there is one more big release obviously coming up very soon with Halo Infinite, and PlayStation is basically done with their own first-party major releases this year, but as it stands, if we're just looking at year to year as far as what each system has had, the list is definitely a little longer on the PlayStation side. You might have your personal favorites, and Forza Horizon 5 on one side might outweigh everything you could play in the other system, but just in terms of that library size, we are seeing that trend continue. So that's all well and good from like an objective, what's been going on this past year standpoint, but really I think the big thing that's interesting to me is just my own personal experience with these two systems and how what they've been focusing on and what each one does best has really shaped my experience of why I go to one system over the other. I've been really trying to think of the best way to boil down what I love about each system, and I think the keywords that really stand out for each one is that Xbox is convenience, PlayStation is immersion. There's little exceptions to this, but I'll explain what I mean by that. Xbox, in terms of convenience, there's a lot of stuff in terms of how the system itself works that I just really love and appreciate. Obviously, a big talking point over the last few years has been Xbox's dedication to backwards compatibility, the fact that if I want to, there are certain original Xbox games or Xbox 360 games that I can pop in the system and actually play, which is fantastic. One of the really big concepts they talked about at launch was Quick Resume, and that really is one of the things that has been a major change in how I approach and play my games. Because on Xbox, it's so easy for me to pick up and play one game, jump out of it, jump into another game, jump back to the other one, and resume exactly where I left off. And it's something that's so convenient that it's actually become a bit of a problem in terms of how it makes me feel about other systems. There are absolutely times where playing on my Switch or my PlayStation, I'll just drop playing a game and swap over to another one because I'm used to just Quick Resume being a thing, and then realize, oh wait, I probably should have double checked and actually saved something before doing that. Add on to this, of course, Game Pass, the simplicity of just browsing this catalog of games that are always changing. Something that Sony does offer kind of an equivalent of with PlayStation Now, but it doesn't really hit the same levels, especially when it comes to older games that gain support from titles, where I can also just download them, play those on the system, rather than having to rely on stream play. Meanwhile, with PlayStation, while there are things about the overall sort of, let's say, ecosystem of Xbox that I really enjoy, ultimately, there is something about the gameplay experience on PlayStation 5 for those games that are curated for it properly that really does stand out. There are things the Xbox does the PlayStation can't do. Dolby Vision is, of course, a new feature. Dolby Atmos support is still something that is exclusive to Xbox and not on PlayStation. But in terms of actual unique features that really stand out right away, the DualSense controller still stands as, I think, one of the most important things the PS5 has to offer. Back when the system was first released, the big thing I really ranted and talked a lot about, right, was how much I loved the DualSense functionality and how Astro's Playroom to me was one of the best kind of symbols of what the PS5 could be. And my fear at the time was, I really hope they don't drop this like certain functionalities on the DualShock 4 were dropped over time, and while certainly not every single game makes use of the DualSense to maximum effect, a lot of those titles that are exclusive to PlayStation have put that work in. When you look at games like Returnal, or even with Deathloop, which again is made by an Xbox game studio that is hilarious to me, these make use of the haptics, the adaptable triggers, the built-in speaker, giving a level of interactivity and immersion in gameplay that just simply isn't possible right now with the options made available on Xbox. You know, I'll be fully honest, in terms of my sort of main approach to these systems right now, the Xbox has taken up the larger majority of my game time when it comes to just sort of regular use. A lot of third-party games that are multi-platform, I end up picking up on Xbox. It's just something about the simplicity and the convenience of Quick Resume that I end up using it a lot for that purpose. But when there are games that I know take advantage of what the PlayStation is capable of, not to mention, of course, just games that I can only play on PlayStation, it ends up being a much bigger selling point to me. We can talk all day about performance differences and how one version of a game might have a slightly better, more stable frame rate on one system, or what specific graphical options are handled a little better. And if that's stuff you care about, that's great. But for me personally, in terms of just looking at interesting, unique edges, I find a lot of the added functionalities that can be done with the DualSense to be a lot more interesting. Now, it's not something that's on every single game. There are a number of multi-platform titles that don't actually go out of their way to do anything interesting or special with it, but the ones that do are very interesting and compelling to me. I'm in this odd position where when it comes to recommending a system to someone, and this is something I touched on a little bit when I talked about the whole 6 months later with these systems, I find myself in a state where personally, again, on the average day-to-day, I'm spending more time on my Xbox, but if someone says they can only buy one system right now with what is available, I still feel like PS5 is the better way to go as a first option because of those exclusive library titles. Now, of course, if none of those exclusive titles really stand out to you, then yeah, I think there's a very strong argument for how I find the Xbox to be a more convenient system, but it's just tough to beat library. Now, this is something that I think can and will change over time. One of the big emphases that Xbox had at the end of the last life cycle was how many studios they were picking up. We've had a lot of games announced that don't really have super clear release dates just yet, but there is a lot of stuff coming on the way. But as far as how this first year has gone, the trend from the last generation really has continued very strongly. One of the kind of hot button topics with these systems right now too, looking at them a year later, and this is something that was brought up a lot when they were first being released, were they released maybe prematurely? Obviously, the hardware themselves were for the most part ready. There can be some argument about whether or not Sony should have waited because, expandable storage wasn't made available right away at launch. But in terms of looking at what actual software has released for these systems, is this something that ultimately could have waited a full year and would have been better for them? And honestly, I find that to be kind of a weird topic to fully work out. First off, of course, you're just trying to figure out how an alternate timeline would have worked out. But really, the main thing at the end of the day is, ultimately, these systems were ready in 2020. You can say that certain features might have been upgraded over time that should have been ready right at launch, like with the expandable storage, but ultimately, it's not as if either of these systems launched and had system-wide failures and problems and needed to be sent back in droves. If anything, right now the problem has just been that they can't make them fast enough to keep up with the demand that's been going on. And sure, the software library has not necessarily been as strong as some past generations have, but it really isn't quite as weak as I think some people have been making it out to be. Yes, there are a lot of games are cross-generation, but that's also because there's sort of an easier level of cross-generation going on with these systems than was possible back with the 360 to Xbox One and PS3 to PS4 shift. And ultimately, there have been quite a few games that have been released that, yeah, are supported on older systems, but ultimately are running and looking their best on these new generations to an extent that if you spent the money to upgrade as soon as you did with the launch, in my mind at least, does feel worth it. It's not as if by buying it last year and playing a game 2 years from now, you wasted time. Now, of course, if we get some kind of pro system reveal in the next year or two, that's a different conversation. But as things stand right now, I don't think I can fully agree with the concept of saying that the releases were premature. I understand the reasoning and logic, and I get what people are saying, but ultimately, the systems, the hardware that we received, works. Ultimately, I've really been enjoying my time with this generation of systems, and I think more so than any other, I don't actually feel that hard of a favoritism for either one. There are things individually that they do better, but at the end of the day, they both accomplish the main goal of just being really fun to play on. It's honestly, I think, a great environment for just anyone who enjoys gaming, and grabbing either of these systems, I think, ultimately is going to be something that is going to be fulfilling and fun for people, as long as you pay attention again what each one has its own little individual strengths on. And with what we're seeing accomplished in this first year as far as, cross-generation titles and early successful games go, I am even more excited to see how the next few years are going to turn out. So those are my thoughts after 1 year with both these systems. If you guys have picked up either of these, if you have both, or you've just been looking into them, let me know what you think down below in the comments. What have you been really enjoying with your experiences with them? Do you want to grab both? Is there one that you just have a very clear favoritism for? Let me know. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you guys later.